Stand up when you talk to me." The words cut through the ballroom like a blade. Clara Lane sat frozen in her wheelchair, her hands trembling on the armrests. $300 million hung in the balance. 200 eyes watched her humiliation unfold. Richard Moore loomed over her, his breath reeking of whiskey and cruelty. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't hurt me. I can't walk." Laughter erupted across the room. Cold. Merciless. In the far corner, a janitor set down his mop. His calloused hands clenched into fists. His eyes turned to steel. That's enough. No one knew that the invisible man in the shadows was a hero. Jack Turner woke at 5:30 every morning to the sound of his daughter's breathing. Ella slept in the next room, her small frame curled beneath a worn quilt their grandmother had made. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, peeling paint on the walls. But it was theirs. And that mattered more than anything money could buy. He dressed in the dark. Navy blue work shirt, black pants, steel-toed boots that had seen better days. In the bathroom mirror, he barely recognized himself anymore. The man staring back had gray threading through his dark hair, lines carved deep around his eyes. Not from age, from memories he couldn't erase. In the kitchen, he made Ella's lunch: peanut butter and jelly, an apple, a juice box. He wrote a note on the brown paper bag: "You're braver than you think. Love, Dad." He did this every day. Every single day. On the refrigerator hung a single photograph. Jack in uniform, younger, standing beside a silver-haired colonel in the desert heat. Below it, tucked behind a magnet, was a military ID card. The name engraved on the metal read, "Honor before glory." He never looked at it anymore. That life was over. At 6:15, he kissed Ella's forehead before leaving. She stirred, but didn't wake. He locked the door quietly and descended 4 flights of stairs to the street below. The city was already alive. Traffic hummed. Steam rose from subway gratings. Somewhere, a siren wailed. Jack took the train to Midtown. 40 minutes of standing room only, pressed between strangers who never made eye contact. He didn't mind. Invisibility was a skill he'd mastered long ago. Lane Tech Tower stood 60 stories tall, glass and steel reflecting the morning. Sunday, Jack entered through the service entrance. He clocked in. He grabbed his cart. Mop. Bucket. Cleaning supplies. The uniform of a man the world had learned to ignore. He worked the 15th floor first. Executive offices, polished mawboards, leather chairs, framed degrees on the walls. People passed him without a glance. To them, he was furniture, a ghost in blue coveralls. But Jack saw everything. He noticed the CEO's office door, always open. Clara Lane's nameplate gleamed in gold letters. He'd seen her only twice, once in the lobby, navigating her wheelchair through a crowd that barely moved aside. Once in the elevator, her jaw set tight as 2 executives whispered behind her back. She was 33 years old, the youngest CEO in the company's history, and they treated her like she was made of glass. Jack understood what it meant to be underestimated. He'd built a career on it. By noon, he was in the cafeteria, wiping down tables. A group of junior executives sat nearby, laughing too loud. One of them mentioned Clara's name. Jack's hand slowed on the table. "She's a liability," one said. "Can't even stand during presentations. Board meetings coming up," another added. "Richard's making his move. She won't last the month." Jack said nothing. He finished wiping the table and moved on. But the words stayed with him. That evening, he picked Ella up from school. She burst through the doors with her backpack bouncing, her smile brighter than the Sunday. She hugged him like he'd been gone for years instead of hours. "Guess what, Dad?" "What, kiddo?" "I got an A on my science project." He lifted her onto his shoulders. "That's my girl. What was it about?" "Heroes," she said proudly. "I wrote about you." Jack's throat tightened. "I'm not a hero, Ella." "Yes, you are," she insisted. Mrs. Patterson said heroes are people who fix things that are broken. He carried her home through the crowded streets, her words echoing in his mind. Heroes fix things that are broken. Maybe once, not anymore. At home, they ate spaghetti at the tiny kitchen table. Ella talked about her day, her best friend, her math test, the book she was reading. Jack listened to every word, grateful for the distraction from his own thoughts. After dinner, they sat on the couch. Ella leaned against him while he read to her. A chapter book about a girl who discovered she could fly. When she started to yawn, he carried her to bed. "Dad?" she asked as he tucked her in. "Yeah? If you were scared, what would you do?" He smoothed her hair back. "I'd think about what I was trying to protect. That makes the fear smaller." She smiled and closed her eyes. "I love you. I love you too, kiddo. More than anything." He sat beside her bed until her breathing deepened into sleep. Then he returned to the living room and pulled the military ID from behind the refrigerator magnet. He stared at the name engraved on the back, Colonel Robert Lane, the man he'd pulled from a burning vehicle in Syria, the man whose life he'd saved while bullets tore through the air around them, the man who'd given him this ID card before he died, 2 years later from cancer. "Keep it," the colonel had said. One day, it might mean something. Jack had never understood what he meant. Until now. The next morning arrived too quickly. Jack went through his routine, made Ella's lunch, kissed her forehead, took the train to Lane Tech Tower. But today felt different. The air carried a charge he couldn't name. The building buzzed with unusual energy. People hurried through hallways with urgency. Jack caught fragments of conversation. "Contract signing. 300 million. Richard's here." He was mopping the executive floor when he saw Clara Lane emerge from her office. She wore a navy suit, her dark hair pulled back severely. Her hands gripped the wheelchair wheels with white-knuckled determination. She looked exhausted, terrified, but she kept moving forward. Jack watched her disappear into the elevator. Something twisted in his chest. He continued working, but his mind wandered. He thought about Ella's question. What would you do if you were scared? He thought about the colonel's last words. One day, it might mean something. At 11:30, he was cleaning near the conference room. The door stood slightly ajar. Inside, workers prepared for the signing. Long table, leather chairs, crystal glasses, everything designed to impress. Jack was about to move on when he heard a voice. Low. Conspiratorial. He paused. Tomorrow she won't know what hit her. Richard Moore stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear. "The board's ready. Once I humiliate her publicly, they'll have no choice." Jack's grip tightened on his mop handle. "She's weak," Richard continued. "Can't even stand up for herself." Literally. He laughed at his own joke. "By tomorrow night, I'll have controlling interest, and she'll be out." The call ended. Richard walked past Jack without a glance. Just another invisible janitor. Jack stood motionless for a long moment. Then he pushed his cart to the storage room and checked his watch. 4 hours until the signing. 4 hours to decide if he was still the man who pulled people from burning vehicles. He thought about Clara's face in the elevator. The exhaustion, the fear, the determination. He thought about Ella asking him what heroes do. He pulled out his phone and called his neighbor, Mrs. Chen. "Can you pick up Ella from school today?" Something came up at work. "Of course, Jack. Everything okay?" "It will be," he said. Then he hung up and stared at his reflection in the storage room mirror. Some things, he realized, were worth losing everything for. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across polished floors. Round tables draped in white linen circled a central stage. 200 guests mingled, champagne glasses catching the light. Executives, investors, board members. Everyone who mattered in the tech world had gathered to witness history. Clara Lane sat near the front, her wheelchair positioned beside the signing table. She'd practiced her speech 100 times, memorized every clause of the contract. But none of that preparation had accounted for the way people looked at her. The sideways glances, the whispered conversations that stopped when she drew near. Richard Moore held court across the room, surrounded by admirers. He was handsome in an aggressive way. Square jaw, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He raised his glass toward Clara, a mocking salute. She looked away. The ceremony began promptly at 3. The company's chairman took the stage and spoke about innovation, growth, opportunity. Clara barely heard him. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her palms were slick with sweat. Then it was her turn. She wheeled herself to the microphone, conscious of every eye on her. The room fell silent. She began to speak, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She talked about her vision for the company, about the technology that would change lives, about the jobs they would create. She spoke from the heart, pouring everything she had into those words. For a moment, she thought she'd won them over. A few people nodded. A few smiled. Then Richard Moore stood up. "Very inspiring," he called out. His words slurred at the edges. He'd been drinking. Everyone could see it. "But I have a question." The chairman frowned. "Richard, this isn't the time. How can someone who can't even walk lead a company into the future?" The room gasped. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Richard stepped forward, swaying slightly. "I mean, look at her. She can't stand. Can't move without help. What kind of leader is that?" "Richard, sit down," someone hissed. But he was beyond reason now, drunk on whiskey and cruelty. He approached Clara's wheelchair, his shadow falling over her. "Stand up when you talk to me," he commanded. Clara's hands trembled on the armrests. Every instinct screamed at her to flee. But there was nowhere to go. She was trapped. "Please," she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. "Don't hurt me. I can't walk." Laughter rippled through the room. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to make her want to disappear. Enough to confirm every fear that had haunted her since the accident. Richard reached for her wheelchair, his fingers closing around the metal frame. "Touch her again." The voice came from the back of the room. Low, calm, absolute. Everyone turned. A janitor stood near the wall, his work uniform plain and unremarkable. But there was nothing unremarkable about the way he moved as he stepped forward. Each stride was measured. Purposeful. The stride of a man who'd walked through fire and learned to fear nothing. Jack Turner crossed the ballroom floor. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing something dangerous in his stillness. He stopped 3 feet from Richard Moore. "Step back," Jack said quietly. Richard laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who knows better than to hurt people who can't defend themselves." Security guards moved toward them, but Jack raised one hand. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to remind this man what decency looks like." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a military ID card. The metal caught the light as he set it on the table beside Clara. The engraving was clearly visible. "Honor before glory." "My name is Jack Turner," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "Sergeant. United States Army, specialized in search and rescue. 3 tours. 16 men pulled from combat zones. 4 received under fire." He turned to Richard. "Touch her again, and I'll remind you why men like me still wear these." Security reached them, but before they could act, Jack moved. Not violently, not aggressively, just efficiently. He sidestepped the first guard, redirected the second's momentum, and put both on the ground in less than 3 seconds. They weren't hurt, just surprised. Jack looked at Richard. "I'm not threatening you. I'm just asking you to apologize." The entire ballroom held its breath. "She built this company," Jack continued, his voice unwavering. "She worked harder than anyone in this room. She earned her place through intelligence and determination. The only disability I see here is your lack of decency." Richard's face had gone white. The crowd pressed closer, phones out, recording everything. "Apologize," Jack repeated. Richard opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked around at 200 faces staring at him, judging him. He'd been exposed, and everyone knew it. He stammered. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, Jack said, but you have a choice now. Be the kind of man who owns his mistakes, or be the kind who runs from them. Richard looked at Clara. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she sat straighter now. Stronger. She wasn't the victim anymore. I apologize, Richard finally whispered. Louder. I apologize. Richard's voice cracked. I was wrong. I'm sorry. The room erupted. Some people applauded. Others stood in shock. Richard stumbled backward, his face burning with shame, and pushed through the crowd toward the exit. Jack didn't watch him go. He was looking at Clara, who stared at the ID card on the table. Sergeant Turner? The voice came from the stage. An elderly man in a military uniform stepped forward, his chest heavy with medals. General Harrison, member of the board. Combat veteran, a man who knew what real heroism looked like. Is that really you? Jack turned slowly. Recognition flickered across his face. General Harrison, sir. The general descended from the stage, moving faster than his age should allow. He stopped in front of Jack, studying his face. My God. It is you. He turned to address the room. This man saved my life. Syria, 2019. Our convoy hit an IED. Vehicle flipped, caught fire. I was trapped inside, with 3 other men. The general's voice grew thick with emotion. Sergeant Turner ran through enemy fire, pulled me out first, then went back. Twice more, while bullets tore up the sand around him, while the fuel tank was seconds from exploding. Clara pressed her hand to her mouth. He carried me 200 meters to safety, the general continued. Stayed with me until the medevac arrived, never left my side. And when they tried to give him a medal, he said he was just doing his job. Jack's jaw tightened. I was, sir. No. The general's eyes shone. You were being a hero. And you've been one ever since, apparently. Even when no one's watching, the room erupted in applause. Real applause this time. Thunderous. People rose to their feet. Clara was crying openly now, her hands clasped over her heart. But Jack only stood there, uncomfortable with the attention, wishing he could disappear back into the shadows where he belonged. There's more, the general said. He picked up the ID card from the table, turning it over in his hands. This belonged to Colonel Robert Lane. Clara went rigid. The general looked at Jack. How did you get this? Jack's voice was barely audible. I pulled him from a vehicle fire. 13 years ago. Different war. Same situation. He paused. He gave it to me before he passed. Said to keep it, that one day it might mean something. The general studied the card, then looked at Clara. Colonel Lane was your father. It wasn't a question. Everyone knew the story. The war hero who'd built Lane Tech. The father who'd inspired his daughter to be fearless. Clara reached for the ID card with trembling fingers. She turned it over, reading the inscription on the back. Her father's handwriting. Words she'd seen 1,000 times on old letters and photographs. Honor before glory, she read aloud. Then she looked up at Jack, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. You saved my father. Jack's composure cracked. I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know who you were, but you've been here. Clara's voice broke. All this time, cleaning floors, watching, protecting me without even knowing. The weight of that truth settled over them both. Years of parallel lives. 2 people connected by a debt neither knew existed. A father's gratitude passed down through a piece of metal to save his daughter when she needed it most. Jack knelt beside her wheelchair. Your father was a good man. He talked about you constantly. Said you were going to change the world. His voice softened. He was right. Clara couldn't speak. She just reached out and gripped his hand, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had tried to break her. The ballroom watched in reverent silence. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was destiny. Proof that some connections ran deeper than coincidence. That some debts were paid across generations. That heroes didn't always wear capes or medals. Sometimes they wore work uniforms and carried mops. General Harrison placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. Colonel Lane would be proud of both of you. The moment stretched, suspended in time. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the entire room erupted in applause that shook the chandeliers. But Jack barely heard it. He was thinking about Ella's question. What would you do if you were scared? He was thinking about his daughter, who'd written an essay about him being a hero. He was thinking that maybe, just maybe, she'd been right all along. No. Richard Moore's voice shattered the moment. He stood at the ballroom entrance, flanked by two lawyers. His face was flushed with rage and humiliation. This doesn't change anything. She's still unfit to lead this company. The applause died. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Richard stalked forward, his confidence returning now that he had witnesses. She can't even stand up, he snarled. She needs help getting through a doorway. How is she supposed to lead during a crisis? Clara's hands tightened on her wheelchair arms. For a moment, the old fear flickered across her face. The fear that maybe he was right. That maybe she was fooling herself. Then Jack's words echoed in her memory. The only disability I see here is your lack of decency. She sat up straighter, lifted her chin, met Richard's eyes without flinching. You're right, she said clearly. I can't walk. I can't stand up. I'll never climb stairs or run a marathon. She paused, letting the words sink in. But the only disability here is cowardice. The room went silent. Every person in this room has limitations, Clara continued, her voice growing stronger. You, Richard, you're limited by your cruelty, by your need to make others small, so you can feel big. That's far more crippling than any wheelchair. Richard's face darkened. You don't? I'm not finished. Clara rolled her wheelchair forward, and the crowd parted. She stopped directly in front of Richard. This man. She gestured to Jack. The janitor you ignored. The veteran you walked past every day without seeing. He stood up when all of you sat down. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. He didn't ask what was in it for him, Clara went on. He didn't calculate the risk or worry about his reputation. He just did what was right. Because that's what real strength looks like. Not power, not position, character. She turned to address the entire room. My father built this company on a principle. Honor before glory. He believed that how you treat people matters more than what you accomplish. And today, a man in a work uniform proved him right. The crowd erupted in applause. But Clara wasn't done. So, here's what's going to happen, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. This contract gets signed. This deal goes forward. And anyone who has a problem with my leadership can leave. Now, silence fell. No one moved. Even Richard stood frozen. His face drained of color. As for you, Clara said, looking at him directly. You're fired. Effective. Immediately. Security will escort you out. You can't. I can. And I did. She turned to the board members. Anyone object? General Harrison stepped forward. Motion to support the CEO's decision. Seconded, called another board member. All in favor? A chorus of eyes filled the ballroom. Not a single dissent. Richard looked around wildly, seeking an ally. Finding none. His lawyers whispered urgently in his ears, but he shook them off. He jabbed a finger at Clara. This isn't over, he hissed. Yes, Jack said quietly, stepping beside Clara. It is. 2 security guards moved in, professional and firm. They took Richard by the arms. He struggled, shouting protests and threats, but they guided him inexorably toward the exit. His voice echoed through the ballroom until the doors closed behind him. cutting off his rage mid-sentence. The silence that followed was profound. Then the applause began. Slowly at first. Then building. Then thunderous. People rose to their feet. The ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Clara sat at the center of it, tears streaming down her face, while Jack stood beside her, uncomfortable but unwavering. When the noise finally subsided, Clara wiped her eyes and looked up at Jack. "Thank you," she said simply. "For everything." Jack shook his head. You stood up when no one else would," she interrupted. "That's everything." He met her eyes and saw something there he recognized. The same determination he saw in Ella every morning. The same refusal to be broken that had kept him going through 3 tours of hell. The same quiet strength that didn't announce itself but simply endured. "Some things," he said softly, "are worth losing everything for." Clara smiled through her tears. "You didn't lose anything. You reminded us all what we'd forgotten." At that moment, the ballroom doors burst open. A small figure raced through, backpack bouncing, sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. "Daddy." Ella threw herself at Jack, nearly knocking him over. He caught her, lifting her up. His face transformed by a smile that erased years from his features. "Kiddo, what are you doing here?" Mrs. Chen saw it on the news. Ella was breathless with excitement. "She drove me over." "Dad, everyone's saying you're a hero." Jack set her down gently, kneeling to her level. "Ella, you're my dad," she finished, grinning. "But you're also a hero. I told you so." She placed her small hand over his heart. Mrs. Patterson was right. Heroes don't need capes. They just need reasons to be brave. The ballroom melted. Hardened executives reached for tissues. General Harrison turned away, his shoulders shaking. Clara covered her face with both hands, openly weeping. Jack pulled Ella into a tight hug, his eyes squeezed shut. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "You're my reason, kiddo. You always have been." Ella hugged him back fiercely. Then she turned to Clara, studying her with the directness only children possess. "Are you Miss Lane?" Clara nodded, wiping her eyes. "My dad saved your life today." "He saved more than that," Clara said. "He saved who I am." Ella considered this, then smiled. "He's good at that." The crowd laughed, the tension finally breaking. People began to move, to talk, to process what they'd witnessed. But Jack and Clara and Ella remained in their small circle, connected by something deeper than words. General Harrison approached, his composure restored. "Sergeant Turner, walk with me." Jack glanced at Clara. She nodded. "Go. We'll talk after." He took Ella's hand and followed the general to a quiet corner of the ballroom. The older man looked at him with an expression Jack couldn't quite read. "I heard you've been working as a janitor," the general said. Jack's jaw tightened. "Yes, sir." "Honorable work." "It is, but it's not your work." The general paused. "Why didn't you come to me? To any of us? We would have helped." "I didn't need help, sir. I needed to be invisible. To give Ella a normal life. To be just a dad. And you are. But you're also wasting skills this country needs. Skills this company needs." The general glanced at Clara. "She's going to offer you something. Say yes." "Sir." "That's an order, Sergeant." Jack almost smiled. "You can't give me orders anymore, General. Then consider it advice from someone who knows what it's like to be saved by you." The general's expression softened. "You've been in the shadows long enough, Jack. Time to step back into the light. For Ella. And for yourself." The general walked away before Jack could respond. Ella tugged at his hand. "What did he say?" "That things might be changing, kiddo." "Good changes?" Jack looked across the ballroom at Clara, who was watching them. Their eyes met. She smiled, a question in her expression. He nodded slowly, answering something neither of them had spoken aloud. "Yeah," he told his daughter. "Good changes." The story broke that evening. The janitor who stood up for the CEO trended worldwide within hours. Video clips from the ballroom circulated on every platform. News networks ran features. Talk shows called for interviews. Jack declined them all. He wanted no part of fame or attention. He'd done what needed doing. That was enough. But the world had other ideas. By the next morning, his story had been viewed 50 million times. Messages poured in from veterans, from people with disabilities, from parents teaching their children about courage. The narrative had taken on a life of its own. At Clara's insistence, Jack took a few days off. He spent them with Ella, their routine unchanged. School, homework, dinner, bedtime stories. The world outside could rage and speculate. Inside their small apartment, they were just a father and daughter. On the fourth day, Clara came to see him. She arrived in a private car, accompanied by General Harrison and her head of HR. Jack invited them up, embarrassed by the worn furniture and peeling paint. Clara looked around the apartment and smiled. "It's perfect. Full of love." Ella beamed. "Want to see my room?" "I'd love to." While Clara admired Ella's drawings and science projects, General Harrison pulled Jack aside. "She's going to make you an offer. Before she does, I want you to know you have my full support. Whatever you decide." "I haven't heard the offer yet, sir." "You will." "And Jack?" The general's expression grew serious. "You've been protecting people your whole life. Let someone protect you for a change." Clara wheeled back into the living room, Ella chattering beside her. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "Jack," she began, "I know you value your privacy. I know you didn't do what you did for recognition or reward. But I'm asking you to consider something." She held out the envelope. "Head of Security. Lane Tech Tower. Full benefits. Salary. That will let you move Ella somewhere safer. Somewhere with better schools." Jack didn't take the envelope. "Clara, I'm not qualified. You're the most qualified person I know. You've spent your career protecting people. You read situations. You stay calm under pressure. You make the right call when it matters." She paused. "And you're the only person I trust to keep this company safe." "To keep me safe." Ella looked up at her father. "Dad, say yes." "Kiddo," Mrs. Patterson says when someone offers you a gift, you say thank you. This is a gift. Jack looked at his daughter, 9 years old and wiser than he'd ever be. He looked at Clara, who'd built an empire despite a world determined to break her. He looked at General Harrison, who'd believed in him when he'd stopped believing in himself. "When do I start?" he asked quietly. Clara's smile lit up the room. "Monday. If that works?" "It works." She handed him the envelope. "There's one condition. You do one interview. Just one. With someone I trust. Tell your story your way. Then you get to disappear. Back into your life." Jack nodded slowly. "For Ella. So she understands someday. For everyone who needs to understand," Clara corrected. "That heroism isn't loud. It's just showing up. Day after day. For the people who matter." They talked for another hour, working out details. Ella showed everyone her science fair trophy. Clara told stories about Jack's father that made him laugh and ache simultaneously. General Harrison regaled them with tales from his military days. When they finally left, Ella hugged Clara goodbye. "Thank you for giving my dad a job." Clara hugged her back. "Thank you for sharing him with us." Jack walked them to the car. Before Clara got in, she looked up at him. "I mean it, Jack. You saved more than my life that day. You reminded me why I do this. Why any of it matters. You would have been fine without me. Maybe. But I'm better with you." She smiled. "Honor before glory." My father lived by those words. You embody them. That's rare. You embody them. The car pulled away, leaving Jack standing on the sidewalk. He looked up at his apartment building. 4 floors of cracked concrete and fading dreams. Soon they'd leave this place. Soon Ella would have a yard to play in. Soon things would be different. But the important things, the only things that mattered, would stay the same. He'd still make her lunch every morning. Still help with homework every evening. Still read to her every night. Still be her dad. The rest was just details. 1 week later, Jack Turner walked into Lane Tech Tower wearing a suit. Not an expensive one. Not a designer label. But clean. Professional. The uniform of a man who'd earned his place. Ella accompanied him, taking the day off school for the occasion. Clara had insisted. "This is history," she'd said. "Your daughter should see it." The lobby had been transformed. Banners announcing new security protocols. A dedication plaque being installed on the wall. And at the center, a photograph. Jack in uniform, standing beside Colonel Lane in the Syrian desert. Below it, an inscription, "Honor before glory," in memory of Colonel Robert Lane, and in celebration of those who carry his legacy forward. Ella squeezed her father's hand. "Grandpa would be proud." Jack started. "What?" The colonel. "He saved you once. You saved him back. And now you're saving his daughter." Ella looked up at him with absolute certainty. "That makes him like a grandpa." To both of us. Clara overheard and had to turn away, her shoulders shaking. General Harrison put a steadying hand on her wheelchair. The ceremony was brief. No speeches. No fanfare. Just Clara handing Jack his new ID badge and welcoming him officially to the team. The small crowd applauded. Photographs were taken. Then, everyone dispersed to their duties, the moment already becoming memory. But Jack stood before that plaque for a long time, Ella beside him. He thought about the young sergeant who'd run into fire without thinking. The father who'd mopped floors to keep his daughter fed. The man who'd stood up when silence would have been easier. Maybe they were all the same person. Maybe heroism wasn't a cape or a medal. Maybe it was just the decision to keep showing up. To do the right thing when no one was watching. To be the person your child believed you were. "Dad?" Ella tugged his sleeve. "Can we go see your office?" He smiled down at her. "Yeah, kiddo. Let's go see my office." As they walked toward the elevator, Clara called after them. "Jack? Thank you. For everything." He turned back, Ella's hand warm in his. "Just doing my job, ma'am." "No." She shook her head. "You're doing what you've always done. Being exactly who you are." The elevator doors closed on Jack's smile. Clara watched the numbers climb, her hand resting on her father's ID card in her pocket. She'd carried it every day since Jack had given it back to her. A reminder. A promise. A legacy. In the months that followed, Lane Tech flourished. The contract was signed. New technologies launched. Jobs were created. And through it all, Clara led with a confidence she'd discovered in a ballroom when a janitor had refused to look away. Jack settled into his role, quiet and capable. He rebuilt the security team from the ground up. Hired veterans who needed a second chance. Created protocols that protected without intimidating. Became the presence everyone felt but few noticed. Exactly how he preferred it. Ella thrived in her new school. Made friends. Joined the science club. Wrote another essay about heroes, this time with a broader definition. Her teacher read it to the class, and 3 students asked to meet her father. Jack came to career day and said exactly 6 sentences. Ella said it was perfect. One evening, 6 months after the incident, Clara invited Jack to her office. He found her by the window, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk fell. "I got a letter today," she said without preamble. "From a girl in Ohio, 16 years old, paralyzed in a car accident last year." She handed him the letter. Jack read it silently. The girl wrote about watching the video, about seeing Clara refuse to be diminished, about finding courage to go back to school, to face the stares and whispers, to keep moving forward. "She says you both saved her life," Clara said softly. "You and me. Together." Jack refolded the letter carefully. "You saved yourself. I just stood up. That's all it takes sometimes. Someone willing to stand when everyone else sits." She turned to face him. "I've been thinking about something. A foundation. In my father's name. For veterans transitioning to civilian life. for people with disabilities entering the workforce, for anyone who needs someone to stand up for them. That's a good idea. I want you to help me run it. You and General Harrison. Jack was quiet for a moment. Then, why me? Because you understand what it means to be invisible, to be overlooked, to have value the world refuses to see. She smiled. And because my father trusted you with his life, I'm trusting you with his legacy. Clara, I'm not. Don't say you're not qualified. Don't say you're just a janitor, or just a soldier, or just a father. Her voice was firm but gentle. You're Jack Turner. That's enough. It's always been enough. He looked out at the city, processing. Somewhere down there, Ella was doing homework with Mrs. Chen. Somewhere, a veteran was wondering if civilian life had a place for them. Somewhere, a girl in Ohio was learning to believe in herself again. Okay, he said finally, I'll help. But Ella comes first. Always. Always, Clara agreed. That's what makes you perfect for this. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city transform into a constellation of light. Two people bound by tragedy and choice, by a father's sacrifice and a daughter's courage, by the simple act of standing up when it would have been easier to look away. Outside, the world continued, loud and chaotic and indifferent. But in that office, something quiet and essential took root. A commitment to see people, to stand for them, to remember that heroism doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. Sometimes it just clocks in for another shift and gets to work. 6 months later, the foundation launched. Honor Before Glory became its name. Its mission was simple: to ensure no one fought their battles alone. Veterans found job placement and counseling. People with disabilities received advocacy and resources. Students learned that strength came in many forms. Jack ran the day-to-day operations, uncomfortable with the title but perfect for the work. He knew what people needed because he'd needed it himself. Not charity, not pity, just recognition, just a chance. General Harrison provided military connections and funding. Clara offered her network and resources. Together, they built something that would outlast them all. Ella, now 10, became the foundation's unofficial mascot. She volunteered on weekends, filing papers and greeting visitors with the same bright smile that had kept her father going through the darkest times. People found her presence healing, a reminder that behind every struggle was someone worth fighting for. One afternoon, Jack was reviewing applications when Ella brought him a visitor. A young woman in a wheelchair, maybe 20 years old. Her eyes uncertain but determined. Dad, this is Sarah. She wants to thank you. The woman extended her hand. Mr. Turner, I'm the girl from Ohio. The one who wrote to Miss Lane. Jack shook her hand gently. I remember the letter. I'm in college now. Engineering. Because of what you and Miss Lane did, I stopped hiding. I stopped believing the lie that I was less. Her voice wavered, but held. You stood up for someone you didn't know. That changed everything for me. Jack didn't know what to say. He never did in moments like these. So he just smiled. I'm glad you're here. Me too. Sarah looked around the foundation office. I want to volunteer, if you'll have me. We'd be honored. After she left, Ella climbed into her father's lap, something she was almost too big for now. See, Dad? You're changing the world. He kissed the top of her head. We're just helping, kiddo. People change their own worlds. By standing up. By standing up, he agreed. That evening, Jack walked home through the city streets. The apartment building where he'd lived for years was gone, replaced by a house in a neighborhood with trees and sidewalks, where Ella could ride her bike. But he took the old route sometimes, remembering. He passed Lane Tech Tower, its lights blazing against the darkening sky. Clara was still up there, he knew. Working late. Pushing forward. Refusing to be anything less than she was. He thought about the morning he'd set down his mop and stepped forward. How terrifying it had been. how necessary, how everything that mattered had come from that single moment of choice. His phone buzzed. A text from Clara. Board meeting went well. Foundation funding approved for 3 more years. Your father would be proud. He smiled at the screen. At her inclusion of a father, neither of them could consult, but both of them carried. He typed back. He'd be proud of you. Her response came quickly. He'd be proud of us both. Jack pocketed his phone and continued walking. The city hummed around him, indifferent and eternal. But he was different now. Not invisible. Not erased by anonymity. Just a man who'd learned that true strength wasn't about being seen. It was about seeing others. About standing when it mattered. About protecting the people the world tried to break. At home, Ella had set the table for dinner. She'd made spaghetti, her father's recipe, and the kitchen smelled like garlic and tomatoes and love. How was your day, Dad? Good, kiddo. Really good. They ate together, talking about everything and nothing. School and friends and the book she was reading. The comfortable rhythm of a life built on small moments and steady presence. After dinner, they sat on the couch. Jack reading to her even though she was old enough to read herself. She leaned against him, her breathing slow and even. And he thought about how much of heroism was just this. Showing up. Being present. Creating safety in a dangerous world. Dad? She murmured. Half asleep. Yeah? I'm glad you stood up that day. He tightened his arm around her. Me too, kiddo. Because now everyone knows what I always knew. What's that? She yawned, her eyes closing. That you're exactly who you're supposed to be. Jack sat in the quiet afterward, his daughter sleeping against his shoulder, and understood that she was right. Not because of the foundation or the job or the recognition, but because he'd learned that being a hero wasn't about the grand gestures or the medals or the stories people told. It was about the daily choice to stand up, to be present, to protect what mattered, to remember that honor came before glory every single time. Outside, the city continued its endless dance. But inside, in a house filled with love and light and hope, Jack Turner finally rested. A father. A friend. A man who'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to look away. And that, in the end, was enough.